Morning, everybody. Welcome to the Strafford MPO and Policy Committee meeting. Today's date is January 20th, 2023. It is 9:04 and we are all participating remotely. We declare there's a emergency due to the snowfall, etc. in the region, and through that act and also our bylaws, we can participate entirely remote. So we have our split meeting between the policy committee and the MPO piece. What we're going to do is do a swap here. So following just introductions, we're going to take the second half of the meeting first, because we've got some people that are having to get on to some other meeting part way through. So we'll do that, and let's start with introductions. And I'm just going to go right down the list and introduce everybody. We know who is part of Strafford Regional and who's on the policy committee itself. But please introduce yourselves as I just call you in order. And I'll just say Dave Landry, Dover, because I'm sitting here looking at my face first.
Bill Fisher, Farmington.
Colin.
Well, that's Strafford Regional Planning.
Jen.
Good morning, Jen Sis, Strafford Regional Planning.
Steve Diamond.
Good morning, Steve Diamond from Barrington.
Dawn Jeans.
Dawn Jeans Lee.
Barbara Holstein.
Barbara Holstein, Rochester.
Yep, thank you. Joe Boudreau.
Joe Boudreau, Rochester.
Mike Williams.
Michael Williams with Coast.
Mark Davey.
Mark Davey, SRPC staff.
And my screen's bounced around again. Where am I? Am I back? Let's see. Is it Katrin?
Katrin Casper-Lee.
Yeah. Wayne Burton.
Wayne Burton, Durham.
Beverly Cray.
Beverly Cray, University of New Hampshire.
This is interesting. When people join, they don't just join at the end, they join mixed in. What a clever thing that is. Let's see, Sophie Robinson.
Hi, Sophie Robinson, Dover. This is my first meeting.
Welcome. Mike Babinski.
Good morning, Mike Babinski, City of Somersworth.
Rachel Dewey.
Hi, Rachel Dewey, SRPC.
Peter Nelson.
Bonjour, Mont Sutton, Quebec. Oh, no, wait a minute. Newmarket, New Hampshire.
Bill Watson.
Good morning, Bill Watson, New Hampshire DOT.
Megan Taylor.
Good morning, Megan Taylor Fetter, SRPC.
Karen Rossi.
Good morning, Karen Rossi, Town of Lee.
Herb.
Herb Ueda, Rollinsford.
Dawn, did I say Jessica Wilcox already? I'm sorry.
Nope. Good morning, everybody. Jessica Wilcox with New Hampshire DES.
Thank you very much. And I'm just going to quickly look back because everybody didn't fill in just at the end. It's an interesting thing. I don't want to miss anybody. Did I miss anybody out there?
I think you got everyone.
Okay. So.
Excuse me, Dave. Tom Crosby is going to be joining as a panelist in a second. I'm not sure if you got him.
Oh, okay.
Haven't seen him yet.
Well, we'll recognize that he's coming then. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to jump right on to 5, as I understand it, Jen.
Muted, Jen.
All right, that should be better. Am I able to share my screen? No, not yet. May I be?
No, you can.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
So is the mid-year budget amendment, is that what we're going to first?
Correct.
Yeah.
So
right.
Thank you. This is our mid-year budget amendment. We typically do this in December, but we've had a couple different things that were in flux that we were waiting on to come into play and be finalized. So we postponed a month to do this. So on starting at the high level, you see there's a few different things where there is some change. On the revenue side, you'll see that there is a big decrease on the federal agency side and a big increase on the state agency side. This is being driven by two contracts. I'm not going to put the detail pages up on the screen because they are microscopic, but you should have them in your packet. So this is driven by two different projects. So on the state agency side, we have a Invest New Hampshire Housing Navigator grant that we have received. And this is a staff person that will be working in coordination with the towns of Farmington and New Durham. And so that is the revenue associated with that contract that has now come into place. And we have hired that staff person. She started 2 weeks ago and or today marks her 10th business day working with us. And then the other change here on the revenue side, that decrease on the federal agency contracts, that is our grant from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. We are still waiting for our notice to proceed. We have completed all of our contracting documents, but what we're doing, and this is, you'll see a commensurate decrease on the contracted side, contract work side. We are the single recipient for the 9 regional planning commissions in New Hampshire, and we have then subawards to the other 8. So what the 9 of us have decided to do is to take some of those funds and push it further into the next fiscal year, since we are still waiting for that notice to proceed. So it does leave some funds to start work this fiscal year, but it really recognizes that the majority of it will be done after July 1. So that's the big change on those 2 lines. You will see a change on the personnel side as well. And, you know, this rolls up all of our personnel costs. This is a couple different changes. The most notable of which, many of you know James Burdine, who is our senior economic development planner. James has taken a position with the city of Dover in their economic development department. And so this is the loss of James in there, but it is also the addition of Courtney, who is the housing navigator for Farmington and New Durham. And the other changes on the personnel side is on the insurances, we had one employee change their insurances partway into the year. And so that's dropping a insurance plan and some changes there. But that is the, that's the changes in a nutshell to the mid-year budget amendment.
Anybody have any questions? And you might have to yell out because I'm liable to miss somebody unless you do something really crazy.
Stop sharing so that you can see a little better.
Okay.
Jen, is the loss of James going to affect any kind of grant income for the organization?
At the immediate point, no. We've been able to do some internal shuffling. So for example, Mark, who you see on the call here, is going to pick up the contract planning work that James did in Northwood. We have also, on an interim basis, hired back Susie Duffy, and that's actually, her time is included in here. Susie was a former intern of ours. She's currently working on her master's program. She's currently in Norway. Her program is split between Denmark and Norway. So she is clearly working remotely, but she's going to be doing some interim coverage, both on the economic development program side, recognizing James's absence. And Natalie will also have a leave of absence later this spring for maternity leave. So.
Anybody else? Okay. This is just an update. We don't need a vote on this.
Yes, we would love to have a vote to approve. So what we do then is it allows us in our accounting system to make adjustments to the budget and the accounting system. So when we do our year-to-date budget versus actuals, it will better reflect where we are today.
Okay, well, there you go. We can't have a mutiny here, so we'll give this a shot. Rather than work through everybody, I'll give this a crack here. I vote yes. This is Dave.
Sure.
And Steve?
Well, do we need a
Do
motion?
we need a motion? If
I'm
we,
sorry, I
David, if
went
we
with
need
us.
it, yeah, if you need a motion, I'll make a motion
Thank you,
Thanks,
Mike.
that
Mike.
we pass the mid-year budget amendment as presented.
Thank you, Mike.
I'll second it.
Can't tell where that came from, but
Really?
Huh?
That was
I'll
Bev.
second.
So
Okay,
Bev, I
thanks.
don't, this, because this is a commission item, it has.
I can't.
You
Okay.
can't, sorry.
No worries.
Okay,
A second.
thank you. Still can't tell where that came from, but is that Joe?
Joe.
Thank you. All right, Dave Landry says yes. Steve Diamond,
Yes.
Michael Babinski,
Yes.
and Bill Fisher,
Yes.
Mark Holstein,
Yes.
Joe Boudreau,
Yes.
Mike Williams,
I don't think I vote on this.
okay. Sorry. Wayne Burton,
Yes.
Peter Nelson,
Yes.
Katrin Casper,
Yes, there are 3 from Leon, though, so just 2 of us should vote, right?
Correct. Yourself and Dawn.
okay. Bill Watson? No, I'm sorry. Well,
Yes.
giving
No.
people an opportunity. No, I guess you can't, Bill, but thank you for your spirit. I appreciate it. Who's left? Herb?
Yes.
Dawn?
Yes.
Tom? Did I miss anybody? No, good.
I think I'm
Sophie and
Sophie.
Dover.
sorry.
Sophie.
I'm sorry?
Sophie,
Am I supposed to vote?
yes,
Yeah.
Sophie.
welcome.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry we can't welcome you and introduce you in person today.
No worries. I'll say yes.
Thank you, Sophie.
Mhm.
All right, now.
Just to
now-
confirm, DES is not a voting member on this?
Correct, it's just
Okay.
commissioners.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect. Just wanted to make sure.
thank you. Sorry for the confusion.
No, no worries.
Well, when we get on to other things, they do vote, and that's what threw me off.
Exactly, so we'll now conclude the commission meeting and go back to our traditional Friday morning policy meeting. So we
Okay.
snuck this in on your agenda since we had all our commissioners here.
Okay, so that takes care of the business side of that. We'll pop out of this meeting and go into the MPO policy committee next, and then we'll get to any roundtable or citizen forum items at the very end. So we're jumping all over the place here today, but bear with me. Okay, so I can just go directly into the MPO policy committee. I don't need a vote on that, right, Jen? Thank you. All right, let's get to the meeting minutes from November 4th, 2022, and I'll need a motion on that.
Motion to approve.
That's Bill.
That's Bill.
And second?
Seconded, Steve?
Steve, thank you. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
nays for the voters?
Don't we need to go around the room on that one?
Do I? All right.
I actually, it's been a while since we had an emergency meeting.
I don't think you do.
I'm
You have to
certainly
do
all
a
right if
roll
we
call
don't.
vote.
We
I
do?
think we're,
I do believe you have to do a roll call. Because the
Okay, that's
statute
all right.
presumes that.
That's
you're-
all
you
right.
might be
I
on the
probably
phone.
by the 10th vote, I'll actually get this down. But anyway, I'll say yes, it's Dave Landry, Bill Fisher,
Yes.
Herb,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Wayne,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Sophie.
I'll abstain since I wasn't there.
Okay. Let's see. Michael.
Yes.
Yes.
Katrin,
Yes.
Peter,
I'll abstain. I missed the meeting.
Mark. Richardson.
I think he's saying
You
yes,
might
but
be
you're
on
muted,
mute.
Mark.
If you just give us a thumbs up. Okay.
There, now my mic's on.
Here you go. Let's see, Bill? Watson? Yes? Bill, you might have your mic on. Dawn, Jeans?
Yes.
Tom Crosby? And Tom? Tom, I can't have you give me a thumbs up because I don't have a picture either. So if you hear me, take your mic off. Am I missing anybody else?
Yes, Jessica. Yes.
Jessica, apologize. As people have come in and out of the meeting, the deck has been reshuffled. I apologize. Thank you. Just a comment I want to make, and you can correct me, Jen or Colin, if I'm wrong, but when it comes to meeting minutes, even people that weren't at the meeting, members, they can vote on that because really it's about whether you reviewed it and you had any concerns or issues. I only bring that up is because we could hit a meeting where we're taking a vote and we don't have enough people to vote on something because people at the prior meeting were missing. And I don't think it's out of line or out of order. If you've actually, had a chance to review the packet and you don't see anything, I believe you can vote. I know that was the case in Dover on planning boards and other things like that. I could be wrong. Just a comment.
Yeah, you're correct.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
That's the individual's prerogative.
Okay. I just wanted to mention that because I wasn't sure if people realized that or whether I was actually correct. Let's see, we're moving on to the performance target setting, and that's Colin.
Yep. So TAC reviewed this, and for folks in general, but Sophie as well, one of our roles with the state of New Hampshire, every metropolitan planning organization and state Department of Transportation sets performance targets. Our approach to planning is required to be performance-based. So we look at as much actual data, reliable data as we can get our hands on and use that to plan things. In this case, we're looking at the safety of the highway network and the public transit providers' assets like their buses and so forth, as well as their safety record. So just a bit of context here. We have a few other performance areas we'll be looking at in the next little bit. For instance, DOT just updated their condition targets and measures for their pavements and bridges. So we'll be doing those in a short few months. So DOT sets targets, and then we have a window where we need to set targets after them. So we do all that in coordination with them. So let me share a PowerPoint real quick. Stand by. Is everyone seeing that?
I can see
Safety
it.
and target setting. All right. So as I said, our planning process is required to be performance-based, and that's logical to me. We want to make decisions on improvements to the highway network and our transportation system based on the performance of that system in recent past. So we look at at real data, as accurate a set of data as we can get, and we set targets based on on performance measures in 7 performance areas. Those are integrated into our long range plan and the 4-year part of that, the transportation improvement program. And these performance areas are used to prioritize projects that move the needle forward in the direction we want it on these various targets. So we want fewer crashes that result in fatalities and serious injuries. So these are the federally required performance measures for highway safety. We set these targets annually. The number and rate of crashes resulting in fatalities, or not the crashes, the fatalities themselves. You can have multiple fatalities in a single crash. We don't want that to happen. Serious injuries also occur all too often. These are, I won't go into the gruesome details. These are very specifically defined in public safety circles, and the types of injuries that arise to these. They're a little gruesome. And then we also look at the number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. So people outside of a car, walking or biking or otherwise rolling or human powered. And the data we look at are a 5-year rolling average. I forget what my next, why isn't it moving forward? You can see here the actual number of fatalities varies kind of wildly from year to year. It's sometimes it almost looks like a little sine curve, a sine wave. You'll have a really good year and a really bad year, and it is sometimes hard to determine why you get a spike or a drop in crashes. But you can see we use a 5-year rolling average that kind of smooths that out. So that target setting can get a little dicey if you have a really good year 1 year and then a really bad year, and you're trying to decide where to go. So we use the 5-year rolling average. On all of these targets, we are recommending that we support the state target and use a regional kind of benchmark for our regional planning purposes. And in this case, on average, SRPC, 12% of the fatalities on the highway occur in our region. So 2022, we won't have those data for a little while. Part of our problem, part of the challenge is that, so there are 2 data sets that we're dealing here with. The crashes that result in a fatality, those go directly to a federal system called FARS. The fatality, I'm not going to remember the acronym off the top of my head.
Analysis and reporting system.
Thank you. Fatality analysis and reporting system. So we know kind of the excruciating details on where the fatal crashes happen. The serious injury crashes, that information comes through the local police departments to the state agencies, and then eventually to us. And because of differences in technology capacity, reporting systems, those data are a little more variable. Many police departments in the state are still stuck using paper forms. How they define a serious injury can vary from time to time, and specifically the location of those crashes as reported will vary. So sometimes we get crash report or crash data that just say the crash happened on Route 16 in Rochester, and that's not really much to go on. So long answer to your question, Peter, we do not have 22 data yet. That takes a precious few months. My slides are not progressing. There we go. So we look at the rate of fatalities. That is the number of fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. We have a lower number of vehicle miles traveled in our region compared to the number of fatalities and serious injuries. So that skews the rate. So we avoid setting showing a target or a benchmark on this one because it looks weird because we end up having a higher rate than the state proportionally. And that's just statistically misleading. But again, you can see the 5-year rolling average and the that smoothing of that curve where it had a lower rate in 2019 and then it jumped back up in 2020. And in the case of the rate, that the pandemic did change things where we had a drop in vehicle miles traveled for a surprisingly short amount of time compared to how big the pandemic was. But that did change the rate. Serious injuries, you can get a sense for the ups and downs there from year to year. Again, and I'll say I should have said from the outset, the number of fatalities and serious injuries and kind of bad crashes is decreasing over time if you look at the really long over decades. So it's not like things are getting worse from year to year. There may be a bad year, but overall technology and things are improving and crashes are decreasing. So that's just a good thing to hold on to when we're thinking about this stuff. So as I mentioned, consistency issues in the data, folks are working on that. The state has a new database that is out and rolling, and more police departments are getting access to GPS units and other technologies that improve the reporting and the data that we get in the end. Yeah, so Rachel put something in the chat here that we had already seen a 20% increase in 2022 year to date compared to 2021. And I'm not sure if that's all crashes or fatal crashes.
Fatals only.
And fatals. So 2022 maybe end up being a bad year in the data. So we have the 5-year rolling averages that smooth things, but if next year when we're setting targets, we're adding 2022 and removing 2016, if 2016 is a better year, then the overall trend will be up, which is unfortunate. And DOT's policy is to not set a rising target. It is just morally not okay to say that it's acceptable to have more fatal crashes than the previous year. So they generally set a flat target. That, in my experience, that's the policy. I don't know of an MPO that is okay with setting a rising target. That's just not that's not how things work. Sorry, every time I click on the chat, it won't let me. There we go. So rate of serious injuries. Again, this one's pretty smooth, but for the same reason with the lower VMT in our region relative to crashes, we don't. The regional benchmark is a little weird on this one. Non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. Thankfully, these have been going down. 2016 was a really bad year, but we haven't had Many bad years since then. 2019 was a lot better, thankfully, and a slight rise in 2020 and 2021. Again, reporting inconsistencies, where what goes into the report will affect how we see things. And there have been a few cases where we had to go looking for a crash because we knew it happened, but we weren't seeing it in the data. So I guess that's one thing to say. Thankfully, there are few enough of these crashes that we usually hear about them in the newspaper first, and then can look for them in the data, and try to make a change on why that happened as quickly as possible.
Colin, the non-motorized statistics, would that include electric scooters, people on electric scooters? There's a lot more of those lately.
That's a good question, and I don't know that the report. Yeah, so it does not include electric scooters. Thank you, Rachel. And with more people on e-bikes, I guess it depends on your definition of a motor, an electric motor on a bicycle. But if someone is on an e-bike, there are more people riding those, not just on rec trails. I recognize at least 3 people riding through Rochester on my drive up to daycare on my way to work that are on an e-bike in traffic. And so reporting will need to catch up to that and how that's defined.
There's one e-bike out. Sorry, Colin. There's one e-bike out there that you could speed on the highway with.
Yeah, I was just about to say the e-bikes can go 30 miles an hour on you can't go on 16 on them. I hope people aren't doing that, but you could cruise down 108 almost at the same speed as the traffic in some cases. So
even 16, like if you could drive more than 65 miles per hour on one of these e-bikes.
I'm sure you could. I'm also guessing you would get pulled over and cited for riding. I would not want to ride 60 miles an hour on any kind of bike. But point taken. So new technologies are going to need to be incorporated into this as people ride more e-bikes or scooters for those short trips. Rachel.
To interject, the reporting inconsistencies are more on the non-fatal serious injury crashes side. The FARS database that Colin mentioned before has a very prescriptive, very detailed crash report that the second somebody dies as a result of the crash, the reporting has to happen on that form, and it clearly defines e-bikes as a separate thing from bicycles, so they're not captured in the fatal crashes. However, the serious injury crashes, the forms for that don't have as clear of definitions for vehicle types, and we see some variation in reporting in vehicle types in that data. So that's where you'll see the variation, not in the fatality data.
And also just kind of a dark point, but something we need to keep track of. If a crash happened near the end of 2022, say around Christmas, if someone succumbs to their injuries within 30 days of that, that is counted as a fatal crash. And so that will not, we basically had to wait till the end of December or January to get a full counting on the FARS system. And so a lot of things are being shuffled, and we won't see those data in their final form for what, Rachel, a couple of months at best.
The Department of Safety probably has preliminary numbers, with the exception of anyone that succumbs to their injuries in the next 10 days. However, we won't have any town by town breakout until later in the year. And again, as Colin said before, with local police departments, some of them reporting on paper forms, those all need to be submitted to Department of Safety and entered into the database manually. And that process takes several months to get through all of them. Preliminary final copies of the database are not typically ready until April. Is usually when they wrap up data entry for non-fatal crashes.
Something in the chat, stand by. So
Sorry.
Sophie, good question.
Yeah, thank you.
Did I cut someone off? Sophie, yeah. Good question about we are not really able, just looking at the data themselves, to determine a kind of a causal factor like that. Sorry, the question was, do we have the non-motorized fatality or serious injury data split by if the motorized vehicle was at fault or not? So that's a really good question. The actual police reports contain personal information, and so we don't get that. We have the data we get for the target setting is a date and a time, hopefully a GIS data later with a GPS point of where the location happened, and whether it was a serious injury or a fatality. So that kind of information, that level of information goes into the target setting. I'll mention, I always plug the road safety audit program that DOT runs. And that, in that case, I work with municipalities to address locations where a fatality has happened, or a serious injury, or a string of crashes that is predictable. So if it's a lot of right angle crashes happening or something like that, I can help communities apply for that program, and they can apply for that twice a year. So that's kind of a rapid response program. And in that case, I usually end up looking at the crash reports and looking at what specifically happened in a crash where someone lost control of their vehicle or blew through a stop sign, and then we can kind of estimate what happened in a crash, because the police reports are usually going into that level of detail. But only if a community reaches out to me, and I always say there's sensitive information in those crash reports. If you're comfortable with me looking at them, I can take them, pull out the non-personal information, and then give them back. But it depends on the community.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Sometimes we have to intuit a little bit on things. But we have to look at the specific report in order to determine or guess causal factors. And on that point, sometimes we get the reports, the data late, because they are tied up in the legal process of finding out who is at fault. Insurance companies are involved in trying to figure out who is at fault, that sort of thing. So if that happens, the reports are slower getting to DMV. Yeah. We pull out motorcycle crashes specifically, since they are so prevalent in New Hampshire. You can see the spike in 2019, and the really bad crash up in the North Country that was in 2020 did not make 2020 a worse year than 2019 for some reason. There was one really bad crash where a box truck killed a number of motorcyclists, and you may have heard about that in the news, and I'm almost certain that was in 2020. Rachel, do you remember?
Yeah, it's 2019. It was up in North Country.
It was 2019. Okay.
7 motorcyclists.
Yeah. So that one was really bad. So you can see that in 2019. But this is just for our region, so that we wouldn't have shown those data or those crashes. So this is a supplemental measure. We don't set a target for this one per se. This is not federally required. A lot of numbers to look at here, but just pay attention if you want to the far right, where you can see the state's target. And we are again recommending that the Strafford MPO support the state target, and that state target is not acceptable for our region. We're not saying 111 fatalities are acceptable in the region, but just that we will support the state target in using our the regional averages as a benchmark and doing everything we can to pull that number down. I'll mention that the state of New Hampshire, they follow a zero, what is it called? There is no number of fatalities that is acceptable. So that's generally the state's policy, and when we certainly support that. On this, I already mentioned the road safety audit program. That's it's a really great program, but it is reactive. When a crash has happened that someone was killed in, we can address the causal factors of that in many ways, but it is reactive. We are hoping to hear back from Federal Highways about an application to the Safe Streets and Roads for All, or SS4A program. Thanks, Michael. We'll talk to you later. Mike Bavinsky's headed out. City's dealing with a storm. The Safe Streets and Roads for All program, we applied to that to develop a regional safety action plan that will involve all the municipalities, and look at specific intersections that will include specific projects, but also looking at problem areas throughout the region. Y-shaped intersections are kind of a common problem in an area where goat paths became cart paths and cart paths became highways, and now you're driving 65 miles an hour through the countryside and on a curvy road, and a Y intersection really decreases the person's ability to look to see traffic as they're trying to merge. So looking at those sorts of problem areas and coming up with a set of projects to proactively address safety problems before someone is killed or horribly injured. So when we write that plan, it would set up all the municipalities in our region to apply for implementation dollars to address specific projects and accomplish some of those safety improvements. So let's see, I have a few more slides on oh, sorry. I jumped ahead, but I spoke too soon. I couldn't help throwing a picture of Oliver in here, playing in the car. My friend from college asked me kind of an interesting question the other day, whether he thought my son would ever need or have a driver's license by the time he turned 16. And I thought that was a really interesting and valid question to ask. We do have vehicle technologies. That car that he's quote unquote driving has automatic collision detection and will apply the brakes if I don't, if it sees a car stopping or slowing really quickly in front of me. So we already have vehicles that communicate with infrastructure and will sort of drive themselves. I wouldn't want to let a car drive without my control yet. Technology moves quickly, but doesn't consider everything. So it's something to think about. Vehicles are getting smarter and they are saving people, but more to come on that. So, as I said, the TAC voted to recommend that the policy committee support the state targets as presented, the safety performance targets. And I think that is it for the safety targets. Any questions on those? Something in the chat? Mark Richards asks, when there's a crash of multiple vehicles, is that considered a single crash or multiple crashes? That is usually, I was looking at a crash report for a potential road safety audit that involved four vehicles. So that is considered a single crash. It's just a multiple vehicle crash. Thank you, Mark.
Colin?
Yes.
So what would a realistic target be? What would realistic targets be if within 3 months, no one was driving faster than the speed limit? If there was just a thought experiment for a second, if that were a reality, what would that do to the targets? What could that do to the targets?
That's a really good question. And I hesitate to prognosticate too much, but I will say that speed is arguably the biggest factor in whether someone lives or dies in a crash. So if people slow the heck down, then you might not see a reduction in the number of crashes, but you would likely see a reduction in the number of crashes where someone is horribly injured or killed. Specifically on the pedestrian side, it is almost an exponential increase in the likelihood that someone will be injured or killed as speeds increase. It's something over 20 miles per hour. It's like, it's a 50-50 shot, whether you make it or not. It's surprising. And that's not even thinking if someone's driving some jacked up F1 or, F350 or whatever, or a Dodge 3500, a big truck, the monster trucks that drive around. If someone's just in a Dodge Neon and takes you out, that's a lot different than if you can't see over the top of the truck and you get hit by that. Yeah, speed is a really big factor. And when I talk to communities, yeah, and so Steve Pesci makes a good point that a serious injury can be a lifelong injury. You may not have been killed, but you may be in a wheelchair, or you may have a mental impairment from the things that from the result. So this all gets really dark, and we're in looking at the data. I always remind myself that these were people. And that's really the driving factor here. So when I speak to communities about how do we improve safety, my first thing is get people to slow down. And in looking at all this stuff, my philosophy is I don't care how inconvenient it is to drive through a downtown. If it slows people down, that's my priority. Because if your community is designed for human beings, then they stop at shops. They don't get killed crossing the road, and all of that. So if it's designed for cars drive really fast, and that's a problem. So I'm seeing lots in the chat. I hope that answers your question, Steve.
A little bit of follow-up. So I have a little bit of data to answer my own question. So in the 70s with the oil crisis, there was a national speed limit, and eventually that got repealed. So the National Institutes of Health did a study on they titled it "The Long-Term Effects of Repealing the National Maximum Speed Limit in the United States." Their conclusion was, just the first sentence, the failed policy of increased speed limits accounted for the deaths of estimated 12,500 plus Americans over 10 years. And you were talking about self-driving cars and how the new technology and so forth. It's very simple technology, or would be fairly simple technology, to make it impossible to drive fast. A car has cruise control. It knows how fast it's driving. You could make it impossible to drive faster than the speed limit unless you declared an emergency. So it would be possible to make it so that the roads were a lot safer because no one was driving faster than they had to.
I've thought about that a lot, and I would love to see a future where a car had to drive no more than 25 miles an hour at a certain point, or 15 in a downtown, and it just automatically did that. I don't know where the quote comes from. It's probably Orwell or someone like that. that said that a good science fiction writer doesn't just imagine the flying car, they imagine the resulting traffic jam. And technology is great, but I don't trust Elon Musk to think of all of the potential consequences of self-driving cars. And there's always going to be someone that thinks about it after the fact. And so does a self-driving car, when it senses a danger ahead and a potential crash, does it swerve off the road to avoid killing someone outside the car and potentially endanger the people inside the car? Those are the questions that need to be asked. And what is an emergency? Like you said, if you can click a button that says I'm in an emergency and the car needs to get through to the hospital quicker, you know, these are all, it's all wild stuff that is here today. Okay, yes, and I am, shoot, it is, wow, it's 10 o'clock. Sorry, all the safety is a really interesting and challenging thing. So you get me going here. I'm going to share my screen again and get onto the transit measures. Please call me to talk about safety stuff anytime because it's really important, and I want to talk more about it. Again, we have performance measures for transit assets. These are vehicles and facilities. The MPO specifically can't do much to on the side of things that Michael Williams and Rad Nichols and Beverly and Steve at UNH and Coast, they're doing everything they can on their vehicle assets and the conditions and so forth. But we set targets in coordination with them, looking at vehicle conditions and facilities conditions. Vehicles are either rolling stock, those are vehicles that revenue generating vehicles that carry passengers that pay fare, or equipment vehicles like trucks and stuff that plow the parking lot out or do other things that don't carry passengers. And this is based on the useful life benchmarks that are set by federal highways, or federal transit, I should say. Most of the vehicles in the fleet around here are the buses or cutaway buses. Buses have a useful life benchmark of 14 years, cutaways about 10. This does not mean that the bus stops running at 14 years. That just means that it, on average, the folks that study this thing, these things find that the buses are at on a condition scale of 1 to 5, they hit about a halfway, 2.5 to 3 around year 14. So UNH and Coast are constantly maintaining and upgrading or replacing engines or doing other things to get more life out of the buses. I threw some interesting ones in there for fun. The inclined plane vehicle, that's like the cog railway going up Mount Washington, those sorts of things. Or the vintage trolley like good old San Francisco. Apparently those things last 58 years. Maybe they just have fewer moving parts or something. So I took the fleet inventories from Coast and Wildcat around November, and looked at all of the different vehicles in there. So we have vans. These are like the vans that do the door-to-door service, getting people to medical appointments who can't make it to a bus stop. So you can see the number of vehicles in each of Coast and UNH's fleets. And then looking at the number of vehicles that have reached or exceeded their useful life benchmarks. There are a lot more large buses in the fleet in general. So more of those, and they're constantly running and they put a lot of miles on those things. I think, Michael, you said 500,000 miles about on average for your average bus by the time it needs to be replaced. And so let's see, I got to move the people screen here. So that sets a baseline for the number of vehicles that are at or beyond their regional, their useful life benchmark. So then setting a target, I based this based on how many vehicles will be at or have exceeded their useful life benchmark by the end of 2023. So a few more of the large buses will be hitting that mark, and the vans as well. So going up to 20%. I'm going to try to conserve a little bit of time here to go through. So these are the equipment vehicles, again, setting a regional baseline at the top there, and showing the target for vehicles that will have hit that useful life benchmark by the end of 2023. These vehicles do a lot of work, and they get a lot of years out of them. So they don't take it to the junkyard the moment it hits its useful life benchmark, because they still have to plow out the parking lot and so forth. Facilities. This is bus stops do not count as a passenger facility in this case. That would be something like a large passenger waiting area, covered waiting area that's like a train station or a larger bus station. Coast has an administrative and maintenance building specifically. They also have a parking lot. UNH has their compressed natural gas fueling facility. So those are the kinds of things, facilities that are out there for the two agencies. And again, looking at how many facilities are at a 3 or below out of 5. Thank you, Jen. Jen's heading out. Lots of meetings today. So again, looking at a baseline and then a regional target. So Coast is in the process, is making a lot of progress on a full bore replacement of their current facility. The admin, maintenance, and they're also going to have a covered parking structure for the buses. That is not a passenger facility, it's just a place for the buses to sleep. And it makes it a lot easier, especially on days like today, where they wouldn't have to get all the snow and ice off the buses before they can get on the road, because that's a lot of work. So looking at facilities that are not in a state of good repair, currently the parking lot at Coast is the only one that is below a 3.0 rating. And we expect that to more or less hold. So again, best of luck to Coast in continuing to get funding to get that new facility constructed. And so these numbers are always changing. Sorry for rushing, please put something in the chat. I can't see everyone on the screen while I'm sharing, but you have a little raise hand button if you have a question as well. So this is just a summary of the baselines and targets for the upcoming year. This changes any given month. Coast and Wildcat are always putting in for funding to get new vehicles, which will change the calculations here. But just to give you an idea of where things stand. So recommending these targets. I'm gonna keep going until I see a chat or a raised hand. Coast, as a federal transit provider, is required to keep track of the safety record. This does not incorporate Wildcat at this point. Coast receives what's called $5307 for its operating, whereas UNH, most of its operating money comes from what students pay into as part of their annual fees. So looking at the fatalities, injuries, and other safety events that happen on the buses, I'll I'll give you a spoiler alert and just say that there aren't a lot of these sorts of things. But then there's also the serious or the system reliability. So looking at the incidents that happen every 500,000 vehicle revenue miles. And then the system reliability is the number of major mechanical failures that happen on the road. The mean distance between those. So, as I said, and I can't believe I didn't update this table. I have it in too many places, I think. The top should say 2020 performance, 2021 target, 21 performance, and then 22 target. So looking at each successive year. I failed to come back and do this. I updated it in the draft tip, but not here. So my fault on that. So you can see lots of zeros. Just a couple of safety events that have gotten even better over the course of time. I have to imagine that the COVID pandemic had an impact on these numbers as Coast was shut down for many months. Or for a couple of months during the pandemic, so that would skew the rate. System reliability, I was chatting with Michael about what is a mechanical failure, and it sounds like a lot of the time it's due to the bus will go through an automatic shutdown process if there's an emissions failure in the emissions control fail in the vehicle. They are diesel buses, and the emissions controls are quite complex, and if one little thing breaks, that can take the vehicle off the road, and they need to get another one to take its place. So that's not necessarily like the bus is rolling down the road and the engine blows up. It can be any number of things. So a really good track record. Let's see. So similarly, TAC has taken a look at these and recommended to the policy committee that they support the public transit asset and safety performance targets as presented. And I can go back to any slides, but are there questions?
So you need a motion on this one, Colin?
Yes. And I think, let me take one quick look at my agenda. That is the only other action item we have. So I'll leave it to the chair, to you, Dave, but I think it would be appropriate to vote on all of the targets together, both the highway safety and the transit ones. So we don't have 3 roll call votes.
Yeah, I think that's fine. You went through it very thoroughly, so we appreciate that. And you just have one table to update, which is not going to be material to our vote. So I think that's fine. Can somebody give me a motion, please, to approve both of these?
Sure. I'll move to, this is Mark, I'll approve to accept Colin's report as it was presented.
I'll second.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. And I'm going to, let's see, I'll say yes. I'll start with myself because that's my face right there to begin. Steve Diamond.
Since there's a realistic way of achieving better performance targets, I'm going to say nay.
Mark Richardson.
Yes.
Katrin Casper.
Yes.
Bill Fisher.
Yes.
Barb Holstein.
Yes.
Joe.
Yes.
Wayne Burton.
Yes.
Peter Nelson, sorry.
Yeah, I somewhat sympathize with Steve, but I'm going to say yes.
Okay, Mike Williams.
Yes.
And Let's see. Sophie Robinson,
Yes.
and who, do I have everybody now?
DES votes on this?
Yeah, DES, and it looks like we lost DOT. But did you get UNH and Herb?
I didn't see Herb's name anymore. I apologize. It's not showing up.
I'm still here, yes.
I apologize. I don't know why. My computer's just doing its own thing, which is not at all unusual. Herb?
And DES, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Great, but UNH votes yes.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
And
you.
then Tom Crosby's still here.
Tom Crosby. Yeah. Tom? Tom, I can't tell if you're on mute or not. I don't think so.
He's not muted, but he's up north, so maybe he's having
Okay.
internet issues.
And Dawn, if I didn't say Dawn.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I think I have everybody now.
I believe so.
Okay,
So
thank you.
Stephen
That,
Peter,
unanimous?
Stephen Peter, please reach out to me, and I'm always happy to talk about the inadequacies of the target setting. I totally appreciate where you're coming from.
Let's see.
I think
So we're gonna move down to where? Let's see.
Discussion items.
3, right? Number 3A.
Yep.
Planning work program, and we'll have to. This is where we'll have to make up some time. I know we have a scheduled 9 to 10:30, but just as I point out, when I do the quick math of the projected time minutes on the agenda, it's actually should say 10:45.
Yeah.
But in any event.
So I will, oops, sorry, stand by. I've got to share my screen. I will try to be less verbose. Just give you a quick update on our unified planning work program that we are currently developing. We had our first meeting with DOT to go over things. This is our 2-year work program. It's all of our transportation work to be done over that 2 years. So it's a big chunk of change, and a lot of work goes that comes out of it. So this will be starting on July 1st, 2023. So we're developing it now. A couple of figures from the last, we're still the current one, which goes through June 30th. You can see the funding levels there, where it requires a 20% match. These are federal dollars. 10% of that match comes from the municipal dues, and 10% comes from DOT toll credits. We're anticipating a bit more for the next UPWP, which is great. A big bump in federal funds. That's partially thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law. And Jen mentioned in the executive committee that will be funding almost another full-time person in that work program. So still to be determined on the full funding amount in the budget, but we're getting close to that. A few things to run through. Our planning process is based on, or is guided by federal planning factors and planning emphasis areas. The federal planning factors make up the framework for transportation planning that are written into federal law. I'm not going to read them all. They are meant to be broad and enable us to do a wide range of work, but we're also required to kind of hit these emphasis points or these planning factors. They deal with environment, climate change and resilience, travel and tourism, just people getting from point A to point B, whatever mode that is that they're on, and the economic impacts and connections of the transportation system. A couple of new federal things that came with the bipartisan infrastructure law. we're required to use 2.5%, at least 2.5% of the planning dollars. Those are the dollars that go into the UPWP on multimodal planning like bicycle, pedestrian, transit. We already do this. I'm pretty sure my participation on the coast and transit boards is more than 2.5% of the funding. So we already hit that target. So it's kind of it's a non-issue. The bipartisan infrastructure law emphasized the connection with housing a lot more than previous authorization bills, which is great. And I will talk more about that on a future slide. The New Hampshire planning emphasis areas are specifically generated by the federal transit and highways folks that serve this region, New Hampshire, kind of northern New England. There are a lot of them. Again, I'm not going to read them all, but they're a little more New Hampshire specific and a little more detailed in the day-to-day operations of the MPOs in our region. So they talk about data collection and monitoring, freight planning, congestion management, and the urbanized areas specifically in this region. The UBWP is broken up into 5 primary categories and has a 600 level there. So just going through those quickly, 100 is the administration stuff. DOT talked to us about a new reporting process that's just going to align things better and kind of make things a little more consistent. It'll be a new system, but you roll with those sorts of things. The 200 category is where all of our planning documents get created. And so we have a lot of hours that get put to people on these, where we're updating documents constantly on a regular basis. We will be helping the state with a long-range plan. That's a statewide thing. Planning and environmental linkages looks at the impacts to the environment on the transportation system and how to mitigate those or eliminate them. And then we're doing a lot of work currently, and we'll be continuing that on corridor-based analysis for congestion, safety, future planning, and those sorts of management tasks. So another note on the 200 side, we will be, we're anticipating hiring an engineering consultant like we did more recently to help develop professionally designed projects to be incorporated into our metro plan. They'll be working with communities, and so one of our jobs pretty close to the start of the new UPWP is developing and selecting those projects to be sent to the engineer. So we have to figure out which ones are priorities to get a realistic cost estimate and a design. So we had $50,000 for this past round total, and that funded the 7 projects that were candidates for the 10-year plan. We're anticipating, I think last time I talked to Jen was about $40,000 per year. So $80,000 total, but that's not just one lump sum. So a little bit more. So, between 5 and 10 projects, depending on how big they are, we should be able to get those engineered. The 300 category is where people spend time on these meetings like this, preparing for them, participating, that sort of thing. The public participation plan, we are anticipating updating that. Then there are other pieces of that related to civil rights and environmental justice. And I'm going to speak more on a future slide about the increased public outreach that we're anticipating, that I'm going to be kind of embarking on. The 400 category, this is all of our data collection and kind of technical stuff, traffic counts. Mark Davies on the call and Stephen in our office did a lot of bicycle and pedestrian counts. So they've kind of really gotten the ball rolling on a more permanent bike ped counting program. RSMS is road surface management system. That's the local pavement conditions analyses we do. The annual data snapshot is being updated, and that's an annual thing, and that's a really big an undertaking and a really important tool, and all of our GIS work gets done here. The 500 category, this is sort of a catch-all. There are a lot of different things. LPA projects like the transportation alternatives and highway safety, general assistance if someone calls me or someone with a question about transportation, that's sort of general. That's where I'll code my time. And then we work monthly or more with regional transit providers. I'm just going to check the chat. Oh, thank you, Mark. Yes, we do have the live or the bike ped counting reports that are on the website. Please go and check that out when I get to the end here, or if Mark, if you want to throw a link in the chat to that page. There's a lot of cool information in there. Yeah, you can see where we set the counts. Not we, I didn't set any. Where Mark and Steven set those counts and kind of what the results were. The 600 category, this we can plug in grants that we get. In the previous round, we had a grant to update the coordinated plan is for all kinds of transit services, not just the fixed route. And we just yesterday sent in an application for a study of the accessibility and safety of fixed route transit stops. So along the fixed route, there are bus stops that have a shelter and are really obvious, and it is easier to get to if there's a sidewalk. There are also stops where it's just a sign and there isn't a sidewalk or a defined waiting area. And that kind of stop eliminates people in a wheelchair or on crutches, whether it's a permanent or temporary disability, from accessing the transit routes. So we propose to work with UNH Wildcat and Coast to take a really deep look at the system and where it could be improved, and work with municipalities to adapt their local regulations on site plan review to kind of bring developers into the game in improving transit stops when they are building a multifamily housing unit or a new commercial site, for instance. So hopefully we'll get that, and I'll let you know. Oh, and Rachel put the link to the bike ped counting web page on our website. So I've hinted at a few things here. Mark Davey, who's on the call, has been an intern and a temporary planner, and has now finished a master's degree and is joining us full time, and is going to be doing a little bit of everything, but thankfully spending a lot of time with me on the transportation side, not only helping me with the technical things, analyses and project development and so forth. And that I'm really grateful for, because it frees me up to do a bit more outreach on transportation issues. I've threw a few bullets out there on the slide. So we're going to be working in tandem, where I'm going out to communities and reaching out to underrepresented groups, folks that can't make it to these meetings, but have a huge stake in the transportation system, whether that's people with disabilities, people who speak a different language and wouldn't be able to participate in this meeting or know what's going on, but still need to get to work in the morning. And so reaching out to folks and talking about transportation safety policy and how to improve the safety of the system, and also kind of developing those projects. And then Mark would be helping me move those projects through our plans in to get them funded and so forth. So kind of reimagining and developing things so that we'd be working in tandem, and just increasing the effectiveness of the transportation program. I think that was all my slides. So I'm going to stop my share. It didn't take me too long, I hope. Any questions on that? I will note, weirdly enough, the one thing we're not required to have a public comment period on is the UPWP, an almost $2 million contract over 2 years. We tend to just do that anyway, since it's a lot of work and kind of an important thing. But you guys are the first to hear about it. So we will have a draft of that to look at in the future. So you'll see more detail about what's going on, but that's a preview.
Thank you, Colin. So what do we have left here? We're down
I think it's
to
just the
Citizens Forum, it looks like. Right?
Yeah, the tip update was on there, but that's
I'm
just
sorry,
to
you
say,
did. Yeah, you did that.
yeah, so that the update to the 4-year program of transportation funding is out for public comment. It's on our website, and it's at the city libraries and town halls. We have a hard copy in the office if you happen to stop by. And so that's all the federally funded projects in the region for the next 4 years. So there's some new ones and some additional analysis there. So check it out, send me questions. We will have a public hearing at the next policy meeting and a full review at the TAC meeting. So that's all I need to say on that.
Okay, let's see. So with our back and forth and across this agenda, I guess we're at Citizens Forum. Anybody want to report anything about their particular towns? And give a wave there.
Mark?
Can't see everybody's face, so we're waiting, but
Mark, do you have something for Summersworth?
Mark, okay, Mark, thank you.
You're
muted, Mark.
Thank you for the reminder to turn on the mic. The other night at our planning board meeting, we approved a plan for a childcare center on Route 108 that'll be for 240 youngsters, and it'll be managed and operated by Wentworth Douglas Hospital. So that will be coming soon.
Where on 108?
It's on 108 where the VA facility is there, coming north on the right side.
Is there an approximate?
Where the old nursery used to be?
Okay.
And the tractor, whatever it is in that area too.
Okay. Any approximate timeline on when that is going to be completed?
They want to get started ASAP. So we asked that question, but I'm thinking that they're shooting for next fall anyway, if not sooner, to get that up and running.
Okay, I'm going to write myself a note to talk to the DOT folks that are working on the 108 Complete Streets project to incorporate that, because if we have a big facility with lots of kids, that needs to be considered. So
yeah, it does. It's the developer is building the building, and whether Wentworth Douglas is either going to purchase it or lease it. So we don't know that quite yet. They haven't made that arrangement.
So Mark, just so that I hadn't heard about this, but can you just a couple more words? What exactly is going to go on in the building?
It's a childcare.
Access it and that kind of stuff.
And since COVID, a number of local childcare providers certainly closed down, and it's needed very much so. The question was asked if it was just for their Wentworth Douglas employees, and no, it's going to be a facility open to anybody.
Okay, and how would people read more about that and learn more about it?
That's a good question. I'm guessing that in time, Wentworth Douglas will put out more information. So,
Okay. Maybe it's been in the local paper. I just
Yes.
don't know. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Wayne?
Portsmouth gets 75% of its water through a pipe that comes through some of our towns. In Durham, it comes through Wagon Hill, right through Wagon Hill. Because Portsmouth apparently didn't maintain the 2 pipes across Little Bay, they have to replace them. And to do that, they need construction roads built on Wagon Hill, changing 8-foot walking paths into 14-foot gravel construction roads, some of them permanent, and doing a laydown area in the front that would eat up a fairly large area of what we now consider environmentally sensitive land. They're doing it this way because the private abutter won't give them a right-of-way that they'd like to have. In their plan to the DES, they say they're going to take that private owner's property by eminent domain in the plan. I'm very concerned about this because Durham has no way out. A 50-year-old easement is now highly problematic the way Portsmouth wants to use it, and I'm betting that if it were in Portsmouth, their citizens wouldn't allow it to happen. I don't have an answer to this, but I am the steward for Wagon Hill Farm and was in the group that bought it in 1989 for recreation and for conservation. And it just goes to show what an old easement, 50 years old, that was sold for $250 by the owner to the federal government, and then for the federal government to Portsmouth can have. There's nothing that can be done about it. The other comment I'd like to make, Mr. Chairman, is if you have a 90-minute meeting scheduled, do 90 minutes of content. And when you put a time limit on items, make sure they're based on realistic estimates of what the presentation will take. That's axiomatic. I don't mind long presentations as long as they're scheduled that way. But as you point out, it's somewhat disrespectful to schedule 105 minutes of content and then put the time down as 90 minutes. And then we lose people, including the director is gone. I think that's something we should work on. The best thing this commission has done in 10 years, in my view, was have town-to-town information. What's going on in your towns that might help me and mine, sort of thing. And so I think we could work on that a bit. And I won't take any more time, otherwise I'll be transgressing my own advice.
No, thank you for pointing that out. I did the quick math and I'm not sure why it says what it says, but one consideration, because I wanted to comment, one consideration is since the tell us what's going on at your town is always at the very end, and frankly, some of the things that are going on are fascinating. I don't know that it would hurt to just rearrange that, and we might start the meeting out with that kind of thing. Put a time limit on it still, but not have it always be squeezed in at the very end and sometimes beyond the very end. So just a thought.
That's a good thought, because that is my fault. You got me going on safety stuff. And I took too much time and I wasn't realistic about what was going to take how much in the agenda there. So that's a good thought, Dave. And I don't want to be the only one talking for an hour and a half. No one wants that. And you guys all have interesting and important things to share. So yeah.
So anyway, that again, this is probably as timely an ending of a meeting that we had in a while. So it actually didn't turn out all that bad.
Dave, Joe's got something.
Go.
Dave, sorry, I know I'm extending it here. Just wanted to make sure people are aware that the Resiliency Committee is having a roundtable on Monday from 1 to 2:30, and it's about energy. So I won't say any more. It's on the website, but please make sure that if you're able to attend, we'd appreciate it. And if you have others you'd like to attend, please direct them to the website and register for the session.
Anybody else? Like, I'm having trouble picking you out quickly with the remote.
I'm not seeing anyone, but Peter Nelson, I'm guessing based on your introduction, you might be willing to, for our Title VI work, translate our documents into French.
Oui.
All right.
Well,
I'll be in touch.
we might hold you to that. All right. Anyway, how about a motion to adjourn, please?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you all for being here.
Bye.
Be careful
everyone.
out there, folks. It's there's a lot of work to be done out in your driveways and stuff, I'm afraid. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.